We're interrupting this program in order to begin our regularly scheduled broadcast. Thanks for watching the Lit TV Network.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Kim's Universe. We're going to discuss further along education concerning um, discrimination, slavery, and all of that hot topic stuff, right? But first, I'm going to invite Alana, Wynn, and Twyla Prindle in so we can get started.
Hello, my name is
Hey.
Alana. Hey, good to be back. Good to be back. For those of you who may not have caught the first episode of the series, my name is Alana Wins, and I'm a brand and product marketing strategist for a financial institution. And I'm very grateful to be here. Thanks for having me again, Miss.
And I am Twyla Prindle, the Executive Director for Cash Kids, where we teach K through 12 students how to master money skills early so they can lead a struggle-free life. Thank you for having me again.
Okay, so we're going to discuss education. We actually talked a bit about economics. At some point, we're going to go back into it because it got into descriptives of why our people use material more than they did their God sense. And that means dressing up more. So, one of the things I want to do is just read something. I woke up yesterday and I was inspired to write, and it has a lot to do with this when you really listen. I like to mesh the scriptures with what I do. This is a part of the throat chakra speaking out, speaking to liberate those who have been oppressed in their ability to speak, and so on and so forth. So, this is a place to meditate in the throat and in the heart because um, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So, we have that, okay? But while it says recalibrate, and it's on Facebook, recalibrate. Recalibrate means to recircle, restart, do rethink, reflect, right? So that I can get my engine, my way of life, my service, my mind, and my body into the right order. So while I'm saying through my writing and what Spirit is giving me, while I don't care for division, I recall Christ teaching the parable of wheat and tares, which brings division in spirituality and world identification. That means that there are some on the spiritual side and some on the world side. So there is a division. We often talk about we don't want to be divided. Divided we stand, all of that we fall. However, think about what your Bible is saying and go deeper. If you actually read the Bible, if you have a spiritual practice, you can understand the parable of the sower and the wheat and tares. So it says you see Christ identifying the harvest by the way we live. So you see Christ in each individual and his harvest to come, her harvest to come by the way that you live. Um, Wheat is indicative to the harvest planet. Tares are weeds having no purpose but to kill the harvest one has worked towards. What we plant, we watch as a farmer, father, mother. It could be sister or brother planting into the family to sow into new generational success or economic wealth or spiritual wealth. Watch and take care is the key. You're watching spiritually and you're watching physically. So Paul comes in and he said the need to come out away from those carrying an energy that is not focused on growth, that keeps you and your tribe in lower consciousness. This is Paul. Now, the scripture that it advocates for it is 2 Corinthians 6 and 17 through 18. Wherefore come out from among them, be ye separate, says the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord. Now we are to use discernment because oftentimes we're taught what Paul might be saying here, but anything that's not clean in your presence is what you are to separate from. That means inequality. You separate yourself from it. You find a way for your groups, your family to thrive in a much healthier way according to the word. Now that's thought provoking. Now I want to bring my people in because education, disadvantage. Both of you went to Black colleges. Now tell me, Twyla, your experience going to a Black school, someone teaching you your history versus what we get in our public schools. This is not a foreign conversation. It takes us further in. And your advantage, as well as Alana's, because both of you went to schools where you were taught your own history and cultures. Go. Thank you.
Well, I have to back up. Actually have to back up to high school. So I went to a predominantly Black or predominantly African American high school, Reebok Senior High School, and we had Black history there. That's where it started for me. It was a class that we had to take, and fast forward going to a historically Black college, which is Florida A&M University on the Hill. Um, it really is not so much the teaching of the history. It's more of, for me, it was more knowing how to navigate in the corporate world, knowing how to handle those everyday things that may come up as a young person. You don't know, you've never worked in corporate America. So, you might hear some things, but to have someone there to guide you, okay, you're going to go through this and this is how you handle this. I think that was the biggest thing, knowing and learning how to move through corporate America, knowing how to move through different life experiences, having to deal with the other side meaning a Caucasian driven world. So that was the number one thing I think for me where I benefited the most. Also, learning that sense of community, the sense of not struggle, but just understanding, a full understanding of the struggle. So it's just that anything that was going on that affected us as a community, because you're on a Black campus, let's say, hey, you might be engulfed in your studies, you're not really keeping up, but you always knew what was going on because someone was talking about it, or there might have been a protest or something like that. And also it gives you a sense of belonging. Like I felt free, like I could just be myself. So much so, which this is probably not the best thing to be proud of, but like I literally would like get dressed at night sometimes, and then I had a 8 o'clock class and I could just rush out the class, and I didn't have to worry about, yeah, they might pick at me a little bit, but it's all in love. But to not have that pressure of, okay, I got to be like this, or thinking about, okay, if I say this, I got to say it a certain way, or thinking about what I should wear, or how I need to present myself. And I think, as a people, we become so many different things, or I just say there's so many different versions of Twyla because you have to navigate through the world so many different ways versus being at school. I could just be me. Like I didn't have to put on or worry about who was saying what and how I was going to be seen.
All right. All right. So, Alana, what's your take on, and even going and looking at the economic or education disadvantage?
Mm-hmm.
It says legacy of, educational deprivation. We're reading at, our topic points, and we see lack of resources. You brought that up in the last conversation. Let's go there.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to take it back um, slightly to where I first was introduced to what I would call Black history. It was probably when I was 9 in the fourth grade. And, I'm a former military brat, so I moved around every couple of years. And that means, every couple of years I was learning different states' history, if you will. So I went from living in California, learning about the gold rush, to moving to Virginia and learning about colonial Williamsburg and immediately being thrust into the throes of slavery, but not through, I would say, the voice of Black people. It didn't seem, in my opinion, that a Black author had written the history of my people that I was, learning about. And then to add on to that, it seemed like the history that I was learning was quite scaled down. It seemed like aside from just only seeing my people in shackles, I
Mm,
maybe came across Harriet Tubman, but that was about it. And I think that that can be a bit,
mm,
I think that can be slightly problematic in terms of programming, because what are we really saying to the children who might be affected by that? You know what I mean? Like, what images are we really sending home to the children when they read that in school and they go home at night? You know what I mean? And so I really benefited from going to an HBCU where the history the history was told authentically and transparently, but also in a way that felt empowering. It wasn't as though the
mm,
only history I was shown was the history of my people in shackles. It was more to that. You know what I mean? It was the
mm-hmm.
inventors, it was the masters, the thought provokers. And then we had buildings who were named after people who looked like me too. So it just all in all felt like a very empowering environment where I felt like I was getting all of my history and some. Um, and I was taught to not allow, um, I suppose, like the history to hold me back. And I think that that was something that I really, really took to as well. I think that that's, again, just something that kind of goes back to who it is that's kind of narrating these stories. Like, what is it that we really are trying to get people to understand, or what is it that we want people to take away from these stories that we share, from the history that we share? And I felt like there was a really positive motive attached to the objectives with the professors at my university. So in terms of those inequalities when it comes to resources, I touched on it before that, um, back in the day when it came to desegregation, the resources weren't always there for Black people. And that's something that doesn't always get touched on or talked about. But when the schools started integrating, there were some, kids who were being put in classes that perhaps they hadn't taken before. So, they might have had to take an algebra class, but they, missed, the class that came before that, but that was the only class that they could take. And so there was a bit of a disconnect in terms of the information that kids were getting. Also, too, the textbooks that a lot of Black kids were using weren't the newest editions. So they were missing information in their textbooks in comparison to their counterparts. And then, too, depending on, the mindset of those teachers in those environments, if they saw that there were some Black students who were struggling, they may or may not have invested in them or tried to help them to, get caught up, or tutor them afterwards, or, those sorts of things, going above and beyond to ensure that they were really grasping the information and paying the same kind of attention to them that they might have been to some of the other students. So that's the sort of inequalities that were taking place um, back in the day that doesn't always get highlighted. As I mentioned before, I think when people hear about these schools getting integrated all those years ago, it's like, oh, the end of racism, the end of prejudice and segregation, everything's, great and gravy. That's not necessarily the case. I do think that there was some lack of care in the education system when it came to, people of color, and, black kids, Black children. And it's sad.
It is very sad. I, on the other hand, was not given the privilege that you all were. I feel like it's a privilege that you were able to experience life in the way that you did. And all of us have a privilege. We make it great. I feel like my life was as great as it is because I was able to go through different scenarios to experience seeing that at one point I was okay with whatever was going on in the world, and then things began to bother me around me, and I began to see that I was accepting whatever was given to me, even in education. Right. One of the things that I found in education for me is that they didn't fit what I needed. I'm an entrepreneur. And most of us are. I talk about going to Africa. And one of the things with the resources of the books that I grew up with was there was very little information about Black history. Although I tapped into something with Malcolm X, and you guys are very privy to him and his energy. However, I tapped into something because I knew as a little girl, when I looked at these pictures on the walls that my people had with JFK and Martin Luther King, the Kennedy family, those plush velvet pictures, some wasn't right. So I got as I grew up, I started to be pulled into different areas to study, not to even take away the fact that I studied religions. And when I look at all of these different aspects, what I find is that every culture has something to cultivate them into a level of the politicians their idea of what they think we should be, as I spoke of also last week. And in one of my classes, I told them, we the people for the people. Why do we need people to actually run our lives? And at this point, in 2023, from the times of the founding fathers, those founding fathers, there's nothing that's changed for us but what we will change. Now, that's very important, what we will change. And as we speak out, what we say changes those that awaken to the times. This is not to exploit anybody. It's definitely to bring us into a tribal consciousness to say that I I have the charge to teach my people their heritage. So I went to Africa, and I was supposed to go again this year. I'll be always going because I'm connected to this family. But the first thing that I asked them to do is take me to their statues. And the reason why is because I had not been in a place where I would see Black statues. They call them monuments. I have pictures of them, many, many pictures. And it was just beyond me. A lot of people will say, well, what difference does it make? It was very important for me to see the empowerment and the power of kings and queens in a country that looked like me. So, what this discussion is about is identification. The Blacks have no identification. They have a social security card, yes. And these are topics that I've discussed with, those from Nigeria. They have their language. We have an English language. Now, I'm grateful. You can speak to me, we can hear clearly, but let's understand where our roots are. And if anyone does not understand their roots, truly the Bible tells you, because your temple will begin to say something doesn't feel right with what this information is being given to me. The feeling is your acknowledgement that you might need to look into something deeper. Well, when you go deep, now you're starting to study for yourself. You're not studying for anyone else or an exam that someone is giving you and what they want you to study for. Your intuition or your inner compass is telling you study and know thyself. Know thyself. Study and show thyself approved, because the only way that you are going to be able to be, how you would say, at peace with your life is finding out who you are. And again, not exploitation, but the truth to set our people free. Salvation is when you find out that there is empowerment or people of empowerment that look like you and they support you. Okay, back to you all. The identification was given even with Obama when he came into office. People were looking for him to really do a great work. That is a key thing. You and you and you, and even Rickey in the background, the identification of strength and say that I'm here to support you is not really rally. People, we don't trust each other because of what is in education that we're given. The signage of other or colonialism, let's just say that, is there. But Afrocentricism is here. The African way is here. And again, I said something last week about we give up. People give up because That's what they know how to do. They give up on themselves because we've seen it. You can work for money, and that's it. You give up on yourself when you only work for money. Your greatest treasure is to work for your spirituality. As you work for your spirituality, your spirit will begin to take you back to whence the Father brought you from. That means your ancestors begin to show up in some way or another. Like Twyla is in her garden every day. That's her grandmother.
And
I've
my
seen
great
Alana serving her parents. That is a culture that we have. We pass it down. Now, one of the things that we want to take further is that in our communities, in the educational realm, we want us to understand that no one can take care of your children like you can. It became a way of babysitting, even daycare, for people.
Mhm.
If our children are going to be anything more than what they have, and we do have a lot of children in deprivation, we have a lot of people that have their children in high places, and I'm bravo. But we still, as a tribe of individuals, we have work to do. Some people might say, "Well, you don't know me." I don't need to know you. I smile when I see someone of color. Why? Because the potential of greatness is there. That's why I have all of these women that I speak with and they speak with me. Yes. You guys want to add anything? I really,
Yeah, I'm just thinking. I'm thinking about learning styles too. I know we didn't touch on this, but this is something that's coming up just because, I spent a little bit of time teaching overseas in China. And I know prior to going into, the different education environments and teaching, one thing we were taught as instructors is that the way a lot of the children overseas over there learn is through like mathematics or problem solving or having some sort of like competitive contest or, some sort of like prize at the end or, things of that nature. And it had me thinking in that moment, actually, it had me thinking about Black people and how we learn and acquire information. And I want to be clear too that Black people aren't a monolith. So I don't want anybody to think that that's what I'm trying to say. We all have very, very specific individual learning styles just based on who we are as individuals. But I do think that there is something culturally speaking that can be perhaps tied to how we may generally, acquire information. If I had to guess, I would imagine that, through song, dance, um, interactive activities would be a way for people of color, specifically Black people, Black children to, acquire information. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you, Miss Kim, had mentioned that when you were in school, you didn't always feel you were getting what you needed. And that could even be taken a step further that you might not have even been taught the way you needed to have been taught based on how you acquire information and based on how you learn. And so I think that even in that aspect, there might even be a bit of an inequality there with how, people are teaching in the school systems, just the way the school system in itself is set up. Um, you know, I'm gonna leave that there, but it kind of came to mind.
Yeah, I agree with Alana. I think, yes, we do all learn differently, but the same in a sense. I know that for my programs, it's like highly sought after because I think it's because I know how our kids learn because I know how I learn. And it is just like you said, Alana, through games, through moving around, through doing things that are interactive, to having fun, doing songs and competitions, just making learning fun, not just sitting behind a desk. And, it could be the elephant of the room, or it could be that sometimes we want to be correct in what we say. But I do think there's a difference when you have a person from a totally different culture teaching a child from another culture. I mean, I don't know the woes of the Hispanic culture, or even for those who come over from the Middle East. I don't know. I can only go by what they've told me. But at the end of the day, I can't really speak to that as a whole. But like for us as a people in a lower income community, I know, okay, rent a center is a thing. That is a thing where, people go a lot and just rent furniture. So that's something that I can teach to, hey, here's some alternatives, where someone else, their experience is different. They probably don't even know what a rent-a-center is. So a lot of times I think that you have to know of or live in or understand a culture first before you can be successful in it, so to speak. Or either you have to have a heart that you really care, not just being so cookie cutter. This is the way it's done. This is the way I learned. Here are the rules. We got to sit behind this desk 8 hours. I just think it's insane to expect a child to sit in a desk and be still all day. That's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's almost, again, goes back to like what Ms. Kim was saying about the identification piece. It's presenting the information in a way where the person who's on the other side can identify with it and can
Right.
grasp it and apply
So
it.
when I was in school, they still had PE in a sense where we were active, and that really it helped where I could see like my grandkids are having PE where they're doing paperwork, and so the activity, yeah, they're not just active all the time. So PE was straight activity. There was either baseball, kickball every day. And I want to hit on that because we are, and I've studied this because my kids are, part Jamaican. So the energy of someone born from another country that has not been, so to speak, oppressed. Now, everyone has their own oppression, but they're free to run through the countries. In Nigeria, so much country. That's what I saw for the children. And I saw one child, 3 years old, when we went to buy fish. They call it catch and hook, or hook and catch. They'll be laughing if they listen to me now. But anyway, a little 3-year-old boy was already being grown to sell products out there in Nigeria. They're entrepreneur world because, and most third world countries are, because of they're not being real, what they call resources. Now, there's resources in Africa, but there's some other issues going on. Third world countries are said not to have resources, so we don't have people going over to their countries trying to take stuff from them, so to speak. And the reason why I bring that up is because in third world countries, they have to make it happen. Give your information, and then we're gonna keep it moving because it's a good day up in here.
Right. Again, I'm Twyla Prindle. You can reach me on Instagram at @CashKids. That's Cash with a K, KASHKIDS. Two S's on the end, so KASHKIDSS. And we are cashkids.org.
Yeah, and you guys can contact me, Alana Wins, on Instagram as well. My handle is @2, the letter N, S, Wins, WINNS, or you can reach out via email, alana.wins, ALANA.WINNS, @gmail.com. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Yay. All right. God bless everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next week.